The scent of vanilla and nervous sweat always followed Penelope. But lately, a new smell had joined it. Secrets. She truly believed her oversized sweaters and quiet manner would keep her hidden in the dark corners of the Castiglione empire. She thought slipping $800 in cash to a quiet Manhattan clinic would erase the trail of the new life growing inside her. But nobody keeps secrets from a man who owns the city. Alessandro Castiglione did not simply find out that his shy, plus-size secretary was pregnant. He had already questioned the doctor before she even left the waiting room. The nausea hit Penelope right as the private elevator chimed for the 45th floor of the Castiglione Enterprise building. She swallowed hard, pressing a hand to her mouth, her knuckles turning white. The soft charcoal gray carpet of the executive floor seemed to tilt beneath her flat shoes. Penelope, penny to the few people who bothered to look past her timid exterior, closed her eyes and leaned her soft frame against the cool wooden wall of the hallway. Breathe, she told herself. Just breathe. It's only morning sickness. You can hide this. She had always been good at hiding. At 5'4" and comfortably plus size, Penny was used to being the invisible workhorse. She hid her soft, thick figure beneath loose wool trousers and oversized chunky sweaters that swallowed her curves completely. In a high-stakes world of Manhattan corporate elites, that was nothing but a glittering glass front for the Castiglione crime family. The women around this world looked like runway models. Sharp, thin, and cold. Penny was soft, round, and constantly apologetic. And yet, for the past 4 years, she had been the indispensable right hand to Alessandro Castiglione, the boss. Pushing herself off the wall, Penny hurried to her desk, just outside his tall double doors. She dropped her bag onto her chair and reached for the roll of peppermints she kept in her top drawer. She popped one into her mouth, hoping the sharp mint would settle her stomach and hide the sour scent of her anxiety. It had been exactly 9 weeks since the night that ruined her carefully built invisible life. 9 weeks since the annual charity event at a downtown hotel, when Alessandro's rival, a brutal loan shark from the Bronx, had crashed the event. A tense, terrifying standoff had happened near the coat room, and Penny had been caught in the middle of it, pushed against a marble pillar. Terrified, Alessandro had stepped in. His presence alone, a dark and suffocating danger, had sent the rival running. Afterward, the adrenaline had stripped away Alessandro's icy, professional mask completely. He had taken her back to his apartment on Park Avenue to make sure she was safe. He had poured her a drink, and then he had looked at her, not through her, like she always assumed he did, but truly at her. When he touched her cheek, his thumb brushing over her jaw, she had melted. That night, the ruthless Mafia boss had not wanted a supermodel. He had wanted her. He had praised every soft curve of her body, his rough hands mapping her hips and waist like she was something precious he had just discovered. But the next morning, the sun had risen, and the terror of reality had set in. She was a nobody, a secretary. He was a man who ordered violence with a flick of his wrist. She feared becoming just another discarded thing, or worse, a weakness his enemies could exploit. Penny had fled before he woke up. Since then, she had gone back to her oversized sweaters, avoided his gaze, and kept their conversations strictly about schedules and coffee. Alessandro had let her retreat, though his dark, calculating eyes tracked her every move with quiet intensity. Penelope. The deep voice sent a sharp shiver down her spine. Penny jumped, almost knocking over her pencil cup. Alessandro Castiglione stood in the doorway of his office. He was a towering figure of broad shoulders and lean muscle, dressed in a tailored midnight blue suit. His dark hair was perfectly styled, but it was his eyes, pitch black and endlessly watchful, that made grown men tremble. "Good morning, Mr. Castiglione," she squeaked, her voice giving her away instantly. She cleared her throat. "I have the finalized shipping papers for the Brooklyn ports." Alessandro did not look at the papers she was nervously holding. He was looking at her. His gaze slowly moved over her face, noting the pale sweat on her forehead, the dark circles under her eyes, and the way her trembling hand hovered near her stomach. "Are you ill, Penelope?" he asked softly. The tone was dangerous. Alessandro Castiglione did not do soft unless he was setting a trap. "No, sir," she lied quickly, forcing a tight smile. "Just didn't sleep well." I'll get your coffee. I don't want coffee, he murmured, taking a slow step toward her desk. His presence seemed to pull the air out of the room. He leaned in, his large hands bracing on the edge of her desk. Penny instinctively leaned back, her heart pounding. You've been drinking chamomile tea for 2 weeks, Alessandro noted, his voice a low rumble. You stopped drinking your usual iced coffee. You flinch when Lorenzo brings garlic-heavy food from downstairs, and you are hiding behind a sweater despite the fact that it's warm in this office. Penny's breath caught. He notices everything. Of course he notices. I'm trying a new diet, she blurted, the lie tasting bitter in her mouth. A flash of real anger darkened Alessandro's eyes, so quickly she almost missed it. You don't need a diet, he stated coldly. You need to tell me the truth. That is the truth, she whispered, looking down at her hands. I have a lunch appointment today. Just running some errands. Alessandro stared at the top of her head for a long, suffocating moment. Then he stood to his full height, adjusting his cuffs. Take all the time you need for your errands, Penelope. But remember, I don't like being lied to. It makes me paranoid. And you know what happens to people who make me paranoid. With that, he turned and walked back into his office, leaving the door open just an inch. Penny exhaled a shaky breath, her hands trembling so hard she could barely hold her mouse. She had to get out. She had to confirm what the small plastic stick in her bathroom had already told her. And then she had to disappear. At 12:15, Penny slipped out of the towering glass building, wrapping a thick camel-colored coat tightly around herself. The cold October wind whipped at her hair, but she barely felt it. Her mind was a storm of fear and planning. She did not take a rideshare, knowing Alessandro had access to her corporate card and app history. Instead, she walked 3 blocks to the subway, paying cash for a Metro card. She took the train to the Upper East Side, getting off far from the office, walking several blocks to blend in with the crowds of tourists and workers, completely unaware of the sleek black SUV trailing her from 2 streets away. Inside the SUV sat Leo Rossi, Alessandro's head of security and most trusted enforcer. Leo was a man made of scars and silence. He kept his eyes on Penny's figure, tapping his earpiece. Boss, Leo said quietly. She took the train to the Upper East Side, just walked into a private practice. Doctor there specializes in discreet maternity care. There was a long, terrifying silence on the other end. Then, secure the block. Get me the doctor's direct line. Now, unaware of the net closing around her, Penny pushed open the heavy door of the clinic. It did not look like a hospital. It smelled like lavender and expensive polish, with soft cream sofas and quiet classical music playing. Penny approached the receptionist, pulling a thick envelope of cash from her bag. Penelope Russo, I have a 1 o'clock appointment. I'm paying out of pocket. Of course, Miss Russo. The doctor will be right with you. 10 minutes later, Penny sat on the edge of an examination table, shivering despite the paper gown draped over her. Dr. Harrison Gable, a kind man in his late 50s with silver hair, walked in. Miss Russo, he smiled, reviewing his notes. You mentioned 3 positive home tests, severe morning sickness, and fatigue. Yes, Penny said, her voice shaking. She looked down, feeling a sudden wave of nerves. I just need to know for sure, and how far along I am. It was an accident, a one-time thing. Let's take a look and ease your mind, Dr. Gable said warmly. He helped her lie back, dimming the lights. When the cold gel touched her stomach, Penny gasped, staring at the wall, praying this was all some hormonal mistake. As Dr. Gable moved the wand across her stomach, a sound filled the quiet room. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Fast, rhythmic, undeniable. Penny burst into tears. She covered her face, sobbing. This wasn't a missed period. This wasn't stress. There was a living piece of Alessandro Castiglione inside her. If his enemies found out, they would use her to get to him. They would kidnap her, hurt her. And if Alessandro found out, he would never let her go. He would trap her in a gilded life, a wife in everything but name, until he eventually grew tired of her and replaced her with someone else, keeping the child for himself. 9 weeks, 3 days, Dr. Gable announced softly. A very strong, healthy heartbeat. You are definitely pregnant, Miss Russo. Please. Penny choked out, grabbing his sleeve as he wiped the gel from her stomach. Please, Dr. Gable. No one can know about this. No files, nothing on a server. You have to promise me. Dr. Gable frowned, patting her hand. Patient confidentiality is my strict policy, Penny. You are safe here. But as Dr. Gable stepped out of the room to let Penny dress, his private office phone rang. It was a direct, unlisted line that only his most powerful clients possessed. Frowning, he walked to his office and picked it up. Dr. Gable. A dark, smooth voice purred through the receiver. The doctor's blood ran cold. He knew that voice. Mr. Castiglione, Dr. Gable stammered, pulling his blinds shut instinctively. To what do I owe the pleasure? A woman just walked into your clinic, Alessandro said, his calm far more terrifying than rage would have been. Brown hair, wearing a trench coat, frightened. Her name is Penelope Russo. Dr. Gable swallowed hard, glancing at the closed examination room door. Mr. Castiglione, you know I cannot confirm or deny. Save the ethics lecture, Harrison, Alessandro interrupted, his tone shifting from smooth to steel. That woman works for me. More importantly, she belongs to me. I know why she's there. I just want you to confirm what I already suspect. If you lie to me, I will have Leo Rossi burn your beautiful little clinic to the ground, with you inside it. A drop of sweat rolled down Dr. Gable's temple. He had built his life on discretion, but there was no saying no to this man. She is 9 weeks pregnant, Mr. Castiglione, Dr. Gable whispered. The baby is healthy. A heavy exhale echoed through the phone, sounding almost like relief. Print her ultrasound. Give her a copy. Give her whatever vitamins she needs, Alessandro ordered, his voice suddenly thick with an unfamiliar emotion. Do not tell her we spoke. Do not let her know I am aware. I will handle her myself. And Harrison, if she ever misses an appointment, or if you ever make her feel uncomfortable about her size, I will make you regret it deeply. Am I understood? Crystal clear, sir. The line went dead when Penny emerged from the examination room 10 minutes later, clutching a small bag of prenatal vitamins and a tiny black and white photo hidden in her purse. Dr. Gable gave her a strained smile. Take care of yourself, Miss Russo. I'll see you in 4 weeks. Thank you, doctor. Penny breathed, feeling a false sense of safety wash over her. She had done it. She was safe. She just needed a few weeks to quietly pack up her apartment, save what money she could, and leave the city entirely. She would raise this baby somewhere quiet, far away from the danger of New York. She walked out, hailed a cab, and headed back toward the office, completely unaware of the black SUV escorting her taxi the entire way. Part 3. The office floor was eerily quiet when Penny stepped out of the elevator at 2:15. Usually the phones were ringing constantly, workers shouting across desks. But today it was dead silent. Her heart leapt into her throat as she slowly walked toward her desk. Sitting on top of her keyboard was a single white teacup, steam rising, carrying the sharp scent of fresh ginger. Penny stared at it. She hadn't asked anyone to make it. Come in, Penelope. The voice boomed from the open doors of Alessandro's office. It was not a request. Clutching her purse to her chest, Penny grabbed the teacup and slowly walked inside. Alessandro sat behind his massive dark desk, afternoon sun casting his sharp features in shadow. He had removed his jacket, his shirt sleeves rolled up, revealing dark ink tattoos along his arm. Close the door, he commanded softly. Penny pushed the door shut with her heel. It clicked into place with total finality. How was your lunch appointment? Alessandro asked, leaning back, fingers steepled, his eyes tracking her every tremble. It was fine, she choked out, standing awkwardly in the center of the vast room. Just had to run to the bank. The bank, Alessandro repeated, tasting the lie. Did you make a large withdrawal? Are you planning a trip, Penelope? No, sir. Just routine stuff. Alessandro stood, moving with the slow grace of a predator. He walked around the desk, closing the distance between them. Penny's breath quickened. The scent of him, cedar, expensive tobacco, pure concentrated power, overwhelmed her senses. He stopped inches from her. Drink your tea, he ordered softly. I'm not really thirsty. Drink it, Penny. he said, his voice dropping into a commanding purr. Ginger's good for nausea, specifically morning sickness. The teacup slipped from Penny's numb fingers, shattering against the floor, hot tea splashing across his polished shoes. He did not even flinch. Penny stumbled backward, a gasp tearing from her throat. How could you? Alessandro chuckled, but there was no humor in it. He pulled out his phone and turned the screen toward her. It was a live feed from a security camera outside Dr. Gable's clinic. You are a brilliant secretary, Penelope, Alessandro murmured, stepping forward until she was trapped against the edge of the sofa. But you are a terrible liar, and you are a fool if you thought you could walk around this city carrying my blood without me knowing. Please, Penny sobbed, the dam finally breaking. She shrank into herself, trying to make her body as small as possible. Please, Alessandro, I didn't want to trap you. I know I'm not like the women you date. I'm just your secretary. I was going to leave. I was going to quit and go away. I swear I wouldn't bother you. Alessandro's hand shot out, gripping her waist, pulling her flush against his hard frame. Penny gasped at the forceful contact. His hands did not hold her with disgust. They gripped her with a possessive, desperate strength. Never, he snarled, his face inches from hers. Never say that again. You think I care about those thin, starving women? You think I want someone who breaks when the wind blows? I tasted you, Penny. I felt how soft, how perfect you are. I watched you run from my bed months ago, and I gave you space because I knew you were terrified of me. I thought you just needed time. But leaving my city, taking my child. His grip tightened, his eyes blazing with fierce devotion. I bought Dr. Gable's entire building while you were in the waiting room. I own him now. I own the block you walked on. I own the train you rode. You are carrying an heir to the Castiglione family. You aren't going anywhere, Penelope. You aren't going anywhere ever again. Penny stared up at him, terrified of the monster he was to the world, but the way he looked at her, like she was the most precious thing he had ever possessed, ignited a confusing warmth deep in her chest. What are you going to do to me? She whispered. Alessandro reached up, gently wiping away a tear. I'm going to marry you, he stated, as if it was already written in stone. I'm going to take you home. I'm going to spend the next 7 months worshiping the body that is growing my child. He leaned down, his lips against her ear. Try to run from me again, and I will burn the whole world down to find you. Alessandro did not let her go back to her desk. He wrapped his heavy coat around her trembling shoulders, shielding her from the eyes of the few executives still in the hallway, and escorted her directly to his private elevator. My things, Penny stammered as the elevator descended. Alessandro, my apartment, I have bills. Handled, Alessandro said simply. Leo is at your apartment right now. He's packing whatever you want to keep. The rest is being disposed of. The lease is already broken. Penny's mouth fell open. You can't just erase my life in 10 minutes. I am the head of the Castiglione family, Penelope. I can erase a city block in 10 minutes, he replied calmly. He turned his head, his eyes locking onto hers. Your life as a struggling, invisible secretary is over. Your life as my wife and the mother of my heir begins right now. You will never want for anything. You will never hide in the shadows again. When the elevator doors opened in the private underground garage, Leo Rossi was already waiting beside a bulletproof car. He opened the rear door with a respectful nod. Penny slid into the leather interior, feeling entirely out of place. Alessandro slid in beside her, his knee brushing hers. They did not drive to his old Park Avenue apartment, the one she had fled from 9 weeks earlier. Instead, the car glided toward a fortress-like high-rise in Tribeca. The Park Avenue residence was too accessible, Alessandro explained, sensing her confusion. This building is impenetrable. Private security, dedicated elevator, reinforced glass. No one comes up unless I personally allow it. Penny felt cold dread settle in. He built me a cage while I was at the doctor's office. When they stepped into the apartment, Penny's breath caught. It was massive, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Manhattan skyline. But what caught her attention was not the view. It was the undeniable proof of Alessandro's obsession. Scattered across the kitchen island were brochures from private preschools, catalogs for custom nurseries, and a direct phone line labeled Dr. Gable Emergency. "Come here," Alessandro murmured, taking her hand, leading her toward the master suite. He pushed open the doors to a massive walk-in closet. Penny gasped. The space was filled with clothes, but not the sharp, thin designer pieces meant for tiny models. Rows of custom silk dresses, soft loungewear, and tailored coats hung from velvet hangers. Every single piece was tailored to fit her exact size. "You bought these?" she whispered, running a trembling hand over a deep emerald robe. "I had my personal shoppers raid every boutique in the city the moment my surveillance flagged your search history for prenatal vitamins last week," Alessandro confessed, wrapping his arms around her waist from behind. "I told them to throw out anything that wasn't designed to celebrate a woman with real curves." Penny squeezed her eyes shut. "I'm fat, Alessandro. I'm soft and clumsy, and I'm not Mafia wife material. You could have any woman in New York. Why me? Why are you doing this?" Alessandro spun her around firmly, his hands gripping her hips. "Do not ever insult my woman again," he growled, his eyes blazing. "I am surrounded by sharp, ruthless people all day. I deal in blood and concrete. You think I want to come home to a woman made of sharp angles and ambition?" He pushed her backward until the back of her knees hit a velvet ottoman, forcing her to sit. Then he dropped to his knees in front of her, a man who bowed to no one, kneeling at her feet. "I want soft," Alessandro declared, his rough hands tracing her calves. "I want lush. I want a woman who looks like a painting come to life. I watched you for 4 years, Penelope. I watched you hide this incredible, abundant body under ugly sweaters. You are the only soft thing in my dark, violent world, and you are mine." He pressed a fierce kiss to her stomach, right over the thick wool of her sweater. Penny shattered. A sob tore through her throat, and she ran her fingers into his dark hair. Her entire life, her size had been a source of shame, a reason to be overlooked. To Alessandro Castiglione, it was something to be worshipped. "I'm scared," she whimpered. "I know," Alessandro whispered, pressing his forehead against her stomach, listening for the flutter of life inside her. "But you will never be scared of me, and I pity the man who ever tries to make you scared of anything else." 3 weeks later, the secret was out. The quiet marriage of Alessandro Castiglione to his painfully shy, plus-size secretary sent shock waves through the New York underworld. To the public, it was a quiet corporate romance filed at City Hall. But to the powerful families, it was a massive vulnerability. A mafia boss did not marry for love. He married for alliances, for territory. Marrying an unknown nobody was seen as an insult to the balance of power. Alessandro knew he had to silence the whispers before they became a roar. He had to present Penny to his men and allies not as a weakness, but as the untouchable queen of his empire. The private dinner was held in the back room of a heavily guarded Italian restaurant in East Harlem, a place closed to the public. Penny stood outside the heavy doors, clutching Alessandro's arm, her heart hammering. Tonight, Alessandro had dressed her for war. She wore a custom deep burgundy wrap dress that hugged every curve of her body, cinched tightly at her waist, just above the small, barely visible bump of her 12-week pregnancy. "Breathe, my queen," Alessandro murmured, brushing his knuckles against her cheek. "They are wolves, but I am the monster that keeps the wolves in line. Keep your head high. Let them look, but remember they answer to me." He pushed the doors open. The laughter in the room died instantly. 20 pairs of cold, calculating eyes snapped to the entrance. Part 5. Alessandro led her to the head of the long banquet table, pulling out her chair before taking his own seat beside her. "Gentlemen," Alessandro said, his voice cutting easily through the heavy silence. "My wife, Penelope Castiglione." A murmur of insincere congratulations rippled through the room. Glasses were raised, but the tension was thick enough to cut. Sitting halfway down the table was Vincent Moretti, an older, vicious capo who controlled the Brooklyn docks. Vincent had hoped his own daughter would marry Alessandro to secure an alliance. The sight of Penny, a soft, unremarkable secretary, clearly infuriated him. Vincent leaned back in his chair, swirling his wine. "Congratulations, boss. Truly, though, I must admit it's a surprise. We all thought you'd choose someone with a bit more pedigree." No offense to the new Mrs. Castiglione, but she doesn't exactly look built to survive our world. Seems more built for comfort than speed." The table went dead silent. Several men subtly shifted their chairs back, sensing what was coming. Penny's face burned with humiliation. She looked down at her plate, her fingers curling into her napkin. It was exactly what she had feared, an embarrassment in his world. Alessandro did not yell. He did not slam his fists on the table. He calmly picked up his silver steak knife, admired the edge in the dim light, and stood. He walked slowly around the table until he stood directly behind Vincent Moretti. Vincent gulped, sweat tracing down his temple, though he tried to keep his composure. "Vincent," Alessandro whispered, his voice dangerously soft. "You have known me since I was a boy. You know how I operate. You know I do not leave things to chance, and I do not make mistakes." "Just an observation, boss," Vincent stammered. "An observation," Alessandro repeated, in a blur of motion too fast to track. His hand shot out, grabbing a handful of Vincent's hair, yanking his head back, and slamming the knife down, burying the blade into the table, trapping Vincent's tie against the wood. Several men jumped to their feet, but Leo Rossi and Alessandro's guards instantly drew their weapons, aiming at the room. "Sit down," Alessandro roared. The men slowly sank back into their chairs, hands raised. Alessandro leaned down, his face inches from Vincent's terrified eyes. "You look at my wife, and you see comfort. I look at my wife, and I see the only reason I don't burn this entire city to the ground. She is the mother of my heir. Her body is sacred. Her softness is the only mercy I possess. You disrespect her. You disrespect my bloodline." He twisted the knife, pinning Vincent closer to the table. "If anyone in this room," Alessandro announced, his eyes scanning the terrified faces of his capos, "ever looks at my wife with anything less than absolute reverence, if anyone ever makes a comment about her size, her background, or her capability, I will not just kill you. I will dismantle your families. I will erase your names from this earth. Is that understood?" "Understood, boss," a chorus of shaky voices replied. "Vincent," Alessandro whispered, pulling the knife free. "Did you hear me?" "Yes, boss. My apologies to the Queen," Vincent choked out, rubbing his throat. Alessandro tossed the knife onto the table, straightened his cuffs, and turned back to Penny. She was trembling, but as she looked at this terrifying, powerful man who had just controlled the most dangerous man in New York just to protect her honor, something inside her shifted. The shy, invisible secretary faded in that chair. In her place, a new woman took a breath. Alessandro walked back to her side, searching her eyes for fear or disgust. But Penny did not look away. She reached out and rested her hand over his knuckles on the table. "Thank you, husband," she said, her voice clear and steady. A dark, triumphant smile played on Alessandro's lips. He brought her hand to his mouth, kissing her knuckles while maintaining eye contact with the room. "Eat, gentlemen," he commanded, taking his seat. "We have an empire to run." Months passed. At 34 weeks pregnant, Penny was a vision of maternal strength. Her belly was full, her figure heavier, her confidence unshakable. Alessandro had kept his promise, treating her like something precious, turning her shame into quiet strength. But a king is only as safe as his weakest point, and Vincent Moretti had spent months nursing his bruised pride, plotting quietly from the shadows of Brooklyn. At a routine appointment at the hospital's private maternity wing, Dr. Gable checked Penny's vitals while Alessandro stood watch nearby. "He's kicking a lot today," Penny said softly, resting her hand over her stomach. "He knows he's going to rule this city," Alessandro murmured, pressing a kiss to the crown of her head. "I have to step out for a call. Leo is right outside. I'll be back in 2 minutes." Alessandro slipped out, leaving the door slightly open. Dr. Gable turned back to his monitor. Penny reached for a glass of water. Then the world exploded. The heavy door splintered inward. Leo Rossi's body was violently shoved into the room, blood blooming across his shoulder. 4 men in tactical gear breached the room, their faces hidden. Vincent Moretti had hired outside mercenaries to do his dirty work, ensuring it could never be traced back to him. "Grab her alive," one barked. "Shoot the doctor," Dr. Gable did not have time to raise his hands before 2 rounds hit his chest, dropping him to the floor. Part 6. Penny's blood ran cold. The timid, invisible secretary she used to be would have frozen. She would have fainted. But Alessandro had spent months teaching her that she was a queen, and a queen protects her heir. As the first mercenary lunged to grab her, Penny did not cower. She reached blindly onto the overturned medical cart, her fingers wrapping around a heavy surgical scalpel. With a cry of pure maternal rage, she slashed the blade across the mercenary's exposed throat. The man stumbled backward, hands flying to his neck. The other 3 men froze in shock. They had been told they were kidnapping a soft, weak secretary. They had not expected a lioness. That 1 second of hesitation was all it took. Alessandro entered the room, not as a businessman, but as the apex predator of the New York underworld. He grabbed the closest mercenary by the vest, lifted him off his feet, and drove his head into the concrete wall. The remaining 2 men raised their rifles, but Leo Rossi, bleeding on the floor, raised his weapon and shot one of them in the kneecap. Alessandro closed the distance to the final man, stripped the rifle from his hands, and ended the fight in seconds. In less than 30 seconds, the room was silent except for the ragged breathing of the survivors. Alessandro rushed to Penny, who was backed into the corner, hyperventilating, the scalpel still trembling in her grip. "Penny, look at me," Alessandro ordered, his voice cracking with panic. No one had ever heard from him. He fell to his knees, his hands frantically checking her for injuries. "Are you hit? Are you bleeding?" "It's not my blood," she sobbed, dropping the scalpel, collapsing into his chest. "They shot Dr. Gable. They tried to take him. They tried to take the baby." Alessandro crushed her against his chest, shaking. "I have you," he growled. "I have you, and I am going to make this right." Suddenly, Penny gasped, her back arching. "Alessandro, my water. It's too early. The baby is coming now." The next 12 hours were a blur of chaos. While a trauma team fought to save Dr. Gable and Leo, a specialized team wheeled Penny into an emergency delivery room. The hospital was completely locked down, surrounded by Alessandro's men. Alessandro never left her side. He held her hand, murmuring words of devotion against her forehead as she pushed through the agonizing, early labor. Across the city, justice was already being carried out. Alessandro had made 1 phone call from the delivery room. By that evening, Vincent Moretti was found dead in his private club in Brooklyn. The message was sent to every family in the city. "Touch the Queen, and you lose everything." "One more push, Mrs. Castiglione," the doctor shouted over the beeping monitors. "I can't," Penny sobbed, exhausted. "Alessandro, I'm so tired." "Look at me," Alessandro commanded fiercely, gripping her face gently, forcing her to meet his eyes. "You are the strongest thing I have ever known. You fought off a killer to protect our son. Push for me. Give me our son." With a final, earth-shattering push, the room fell silent for 2 agonizing seconds, followed by the piercing cry of a newborn baby. Penny collapsed back against the pillows, sobbing. "He's beautiful," the doctor announced. "A little early, but his lungs sound strong. A healthy baby boy." The nurse handed the tiny, crying infant not to Penny first, but to Alessandro, the ruthless mob boss, a man who had ended a life without blinking hours earlier, stared down at the fragile bundle in his arms. Tears spilled down his sharp cheekbones. He fell to his knees beside Penny's bed, resting the baby against her chest. "Look what you made me do," Alessandro wept, pressing his lips to her hair, his voice breaking. "Look at our perfect boy." Penny looked down at the tiny face, a perfect blend of her softness and Alessandro's sharp features. She was exhausted, she was battered, and her life would never be normal again. She would always have guards. She would always live behind reinforced glass. But as she looked up at the terrifying man on his knees, crying as he kissed her fingers, she realized she was not a prisoner. She was the center of his universe. "What do we name him?" Penny whispered, exhausted but glowing. Alessandro looked at the mother of his child, the woman who had completely dismantled his cold heart. "Leo," he decided softly, honoring the man who had taken a bullet for her. "Leo Castiglione, the future king of New York." Penny smiled, pulling Alessandro down by his collar to capture his lips in a fierce, breathless kiss. "Long live the king," she whispered against his mouth. Alessandro kissed her back, his hand gently resting on her waist. "And long live the queen."